Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf, 1882-1941. Full name, Adeline Virginia Stephen. Later, after marriage, her name was changed as Adeline Virginia Woolf. She was born in 1882 in Kensington, London, England. Her parents, Leslie Stephen, who was an esteemed historian, author, and editor, and her mother, Julia Prinsip Stephen, who was a renowned nurse, model for pre-Raphaelite painters, and a philanthropist. Virginia Woolf's siblings, 4 half-siblings, and 3 full siblings, including Van Isabel, who was a famous painter. Family influence. She was raised in a privileged intellectual and literary environment with access to a vast private library, early exposure to literature, philosophy, and art. Childhood trauma. She endured sexual abuse by 2 half-brothers during her early years, which deeply impacted her psychological health. Now the loss of her mother. Mother died in 1895 and her father died in 1904. Both deaths profoundly affected Woolf's mental state and shaped her outlook on life and death. She had no formal schooling. He was educated at home with private tutors and extensive self-study. She developed a strong literary and philosophical interests from an early age. Her early friendships and intellectual exchanges with members of the Bloomsbury Group, which became a central influence throughout her life. The Bloomsbury Group. The Bloomsbury Group is an influential collective of writers, artists, and thinkers, including E.M. Forster, Lytton Strachey, John Maynard Keynes, and Leonard Woolf. Promoted modernist thinking, liberal attitudes towards sexuality and gender, and an opposition to Victorian moralism. The group encouraged Virginia Woolf's experimentation with a literary form and a social critique. Personal life and marriage. Virginia Woolf was married to Leonard Woolf in 1912, a writer, publisher, and a political theorist. A supportive and enduring partnership. Leonard and Virginia co-founded the Hogarth Press in 1917. Which published much of her works and key modernist and psychoanalytic texts, for example, texts of Freud. Despite their close marriage, Virginia Woolf's mental illness and social conventions complicated her personal life, including her bisexuality and close relationships with women such as Vita Sackville West. Mental health and struggles. Recurrent and severe episodes of depression, psychosis, and possible bipolar disorder throughout her life. Several nervous breakdowns, hospitalizations, and near-suicide attempts. Chronic struggles with mental health influenced the psychological depth and themes of trauma, madness, and mortality in her writing. Virginia Woolf committed suicide on March 28, 1941 by drowning herself in the River Ouse in Sussex, fearing another breakdown amid World War II chaos. Let's analyze the major literary works and themes of Virginia Woolf. First of all, novels. The first one, The Voyage Out, 1915. Is Virginia Woolf's first novel, exploring themes of self-discovery, societal expectations, and colonialism through the experiences of Rachel Winries. The next work is Night and Day, 1919. It focuses on gender roles and relationships in Edwardian England, contrasting intellectualism and emotional life. The next work, Jacob's Room, 1922, experimental novel using fragmented narrative to portray the elusive nature of identity and loss, reflects Virginia Woolf's modernist style. The next work is Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, a stream of consciousness narrative centered on Clarissa Dalloway's day, themes of time, mental illness. Septimus Barron Smith is the mental patient in this novel, and a social stratification. The next work is To the Lighthouse, 1927. It's a semi-autobiographical novel emphasizing family dynamics, impermanence, and the passage of time, and she uses non-linear narrative and an interior monologue. The next work, Orlando, 1928, is a groundbreaking novel challenging fixed gender identity by following the life of a protagonist who changes sex and lives through centuries, and it is inspired by the person Beta Sackville Best, with whom Virginia Woolf had a bisexual relation. The next work is The Waves, 1931, experimental poetic novel composed of soliloquies from 6 characters. It meditates on consciousness, friendship, and immortality. The next work, Flush, a biography published in 1933, is a playful biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Cocker Spaniel, a dog, blending fact and fiction to explore class and art. The next work, Between the Acts, 1941, posthumously published novel focusing on an English village pageant on the brink of World War II. It explores history, art, and a human connection. Now Virginia Woolf's essays and criticism. First one, A Room of One's Own, 1929. A landmark feminist essay arguing that women need financial independence and a private space to write. And this book critiques patriarchy and literary history's exclusion of women. The next work, 3 Guineas, 1938, is a book that explores feminism, pacifism, and anti-fascism, and it critiques militarism and patriarchy's role in war. The next work is The Common Reader, 1925-1932. 2 volumes of literary criticism essays aimed at the general reader, analyzing writers from Shakespeare to contemporary authors. So overall, Virginia Woolf is a prolific essayist with important works on art, history, and literature, including reflections on the craft of writing and the role of women in culture. Now the literary style and innovations. Virginia Woolf is a modernist innovator. She employed a stream of consciousness narratives, non-linear timelines, and a fragmented perspectives to depict human psychology. Focus on subjectivity. Detailed exploration of inner thoughts, emotions, and perceptions rather than external events. Symbolism and imagery. She used the symbolic language, natural imagery, especially the sea, sky, and lighthouse, and a poetic prose to evoke mood and meaning. Feminist consciousness. early and influential voice for women's intellectual and creative freedom. Narrative experimentation. She broke traditional plot structures, emphasizing mood, time, and a character consciousness over linear storytelling. Now let's analyze the major themes in her works. First of all, gender and sexuality. She questioned fixed gender roles, explored fluid identities, and critiqued patriarchal power structures. The next theme, time and memory. She explored the fluidity and subjectivity of time, especially how past and present intertwine in a consciousness. Mental illness and trauma. She reflected personal struggles with mental health through characters and narrative techniques. The next theme, art and creativity. She explored the role of art and the artist's role in society, especially in capturing human experience. The next theme, social critique. She critiqued class divisions, imperialism, and societal expectations, often through subtle and layered narratives. The next theme, mortality and transience. Frequent meditation on death, loss, and the ephemeral nature of life. Now let's discuss the critical reception and legacy of the writer. Initially met with mixed critical responses, but gradually recognized as a central figure in modernist literature. Today, she is considered one of the most important English language writers of the 20th century and a pioneer of feminist literary criticism. Her work has influenced countless writers and theories, especially in feminist, queer, and modernist literary studies. Virginia Woolf is a subject of extensive scholarly research, biographies, and adaptations in film and theatre. Woolf's life story and mental health struggles have contributed to broader conversations about creativity and mental illness. Now let's analyze the main works of Virginia Woolf. First of all, Mrs. Dalloway, 1925. The work explores the fluidity of time and the inner consciousness of characters over a single day, focusing on social conventions and a mental illness. It contrasts the public figure with a private trauma, especially through the character of Septimus Warren Smith. Then we have To the Lighthouse, 1927, a semi-autobiographical meditation on time, memory, and a loss, examining family dynamics and artistic creation. The novel uses shifting perspectives to explore subjective reality and the search for meaning. The next work is Orlando, 1928, a playful and imaginative exploration of gender fluidity and identity through the protagonist who lives for centuries and challenges sex. It critiques societal norms and celebrates the freedom of artistic and personal transformation. The next work, that is Waves, 1931, an experimental novel presenting 6 characters' soliloquies that delve into identity, friendship, and the passage of time. It highlights the interconnectedness of individual consciousness with nature and mortality. The next work, Jacob's Room, 1922, a fragmented modernist portrait of Jacob Flanders that focuses on absence and the unknowability of others. The novel reflects on a loss, memory, and the limitations of language. The next work, A Room of One's Own, 1929, is a feminist essay arguing for women's financial independence and a private space to create literature. It critiques patriarchal structures that have historically silenced their female voices. The next book, The Voyage Out, 1915, examines themes of self-discovery, societal expectations, and colonialism through the journey of Rachel Windrace. It contrasts innocence with experience in a changing Edwardian world. The next book, Night and Day, 1919, focuses on the tension between intellectualism and emotion, exploring gender roles and marriage in Edwardian England. The novel critiques social conventions and advocates for personal freedom. The next book, Flesh, a Biography, 1933. It is a light-hearted biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Cocker Spaniel dog that critiques class divisions and Victorian norms. It blends humor with a social commentary on art and society. The next book, Between the Acts, 1941. Set against the backdrop of the looming Second World War, this novel explores the role of art, history, and a community in a rural English village. It meditates on the cyclical nature of human life and a cultural change. The next book, Monday or Tuesday, 1921. A collection of short stories emphasizing moments of consciousness and a perception. These stories experiment with a narrative form and the nature of reality. This book, The Common Reader, 1925-1932. Essays offering insights into literature and criticism aimed at general readers. Woolf discusses writers and literary themes with accessibility and depth. The next book, 3 Guineas, 1938, an extended essay addressing feminism, pacifism, and anti-fascism. It critiques militarism and patriarchal power structures while advocating for women's intellectual freedom. The next book, Kew Gardens, 1919, a short story that uses detailed descriptions of a garden to explore human consciousness and fleeting moments of beauty. It reflects on perception and the passage of time. The next book, The Mark on the Wall, 1917, a reflective short story that uses a simple observation as a springboard for philosophical meditation on uncertainty, reality, and self-awareness. It challenges traditional narrative forms. The next book, Lapin and Lapinova, 1920, is a satirical short story about a couple who retreat into fantasy to escape the pressures of modern life. It explores themes of imagination, escapism, and mundane realities of existence. The next book, The Lady in the Looking Glass, 1929, a story exploring themes of identity, perception, and reality through the fragmented thoughts of its protagonist. It questions how well we truly know others. The next book, Scenes from the Marriage, 1930, is a short story focusing on the complexities of marriage and communication between spouses. It reveals emotional undercurrents beneath everyday interactions. The next book, A Haunted House, 1921, a ghost story symbolizing love and memory where the past haunts the present. It explores themes of continuity and the invisible ties between people. Next book, Solid Objects, 1920. A short story about a man who compulsively collects seemingly insignificant objects, revealing the human desire for meaning and a connection. it meditates on material culture and personal obsession.